Hi, very good morning. I am Dr. Janak Patel, MD, General Physician. All my video lectures are mainly for educative purpose. In continuity with neurology series, today I'll be discussing on one of the another interesting topic on clinical side of CNS examination or neurological examination, that is higher function. So as routine we always say that you can see only what you know, and you can also see lot of things just by observing. Means for observation you should be aware of what you are looking for. So we'll be going through those different parts. So practice and practice makes man perfect. We'll be going through neurological examination, which will include higher function, which is cognitive function, memory function, emotion, reasoning, etc., followed by cranial nerve examination, motor system, sensory system, reflexes, etc. So CNS exam will include higher function examination, cranial nerve, motor system, sensory system, reflexes, posture, gait, equilibrium, involuntary movement, coordination, cerebellum. All this will be possible only in case of fully conscious patient. In an unconscious patient, some of the thing will be extremely difficult to examine, and some will be impossible to examine. Particularly in case of diabetic autonomic neuropathy, you can go also for autonomic nervous system examination. And examination of CNS does include examination of spine, and to look for gibbous, kyphosis, scoliosis, in skull, microcephaly, macrocephaly, increase in the size of the skull, bulging of fontanelles, etc., and meningeal signs like neck rigidity, Kernick, Brudzinski sign. Hence, all this examination is very important. Now, particularly in an unconscious patient with altered mental status, speech examination will be very difficult. There will be very few cranial nerves which you will be able to examine, like pupillary reflex, doll's eye movement, gag reflex, response to painful stimulus and contraction of facial muscles. You will be able to examine the posture, and if there is any decerebrate posture or decorticate posture or flaccid posture, or there is opisthotonus, etc., can be also seen. You can have signs of meningeal irritation in the form of neck rigidity. In children, you can demonstrate Kernick's and Brudzinski sign. Gait you cannot examine. Tone and power you cannot examine. Involuntary movement will be also impossible to examine in an unconscious individual. Even sensory system examination will be very difficult or almost impossible. We can look for superficial reflex in the form of a plantar reflex, which will help you to identify unilateral or bilateral signs. Deep tendon reflex also you will be able to elicit, and that will also partially help you to identify whether it is upper motor neuron or lower motor neuron. So those are some of the things which you can examine in an unconscious patient. Will not be mentioning at present. Already we have discussed in a full chapter in a coma. You can also look for what we call as pattern of breathing, whether it is Chine-Stroke breathing, whether it is Barrett's breathing, apneustic breathing, or whether it is tachypnea with hyperapnea, we call that as Kussmaul's breathing, or there is ataxic breathing, etc. And we can also look in a vital signs to identify what we call as a Cushing triads. We already mentioned neck stiffness will be a sign in case of meningitis, subarachnoid hemorrhage, and intracranial pressure elevation, particularly with tonsillar herniation. Pupillary examination will be very, very important. And you can also examine the fundus for papilledema. Eye movement will not be possible, but you can have examination by doll's eye movement, and if nystagmus is present, it will be helpful. Corneal reflex can be elicitable, gag reflex, decorticate posture, decerebrate posture, and complete flaccid posture. Roughly the tone of the upper limb as well as lower limb you can estimate. Deep tendon reflex, and among superficial reflex mainly plantar will be very, very helpful. So these are some of the things which we will be examining. Now coming to what we call as higher function. We know the cortex has got absolutely some of the function which are characteristics. Say first function is to keep the patient alert and conscious. And whenever the person is alert and fully oriented, we call that as a conscious patient. So orientation, alertness, short-term memory, executive function, speech, visual, then identification of objects, etc. Still there are a lot of functions. All those functions are by cerebral cortex. And all special senses, olfactory, auditory, gustatory, that is taste sensation, and visual, plus somatic sensation, localization, discrimination, 2-point discrimination, stereognosis, and graphesthesia. All these are the special function of cerebral cortex. Frontal lobe is concerned with voluntary motor function, motivation, sense of smell, mood, and even thinking process. Parietal lobe is mainly concerned with identification of sensation, particularly somatic sensation. Occipital lobe concerned with visual input. Temporal lobe is concerned with smell and hearing. That is olfactory. Partly it is also by frontal lobe. So frontal lobe and temporal lobe. But hearing will be mainly by temporal lobe, as well as we call taste sensation will be partially also by part of the temporal lobe. And this, along with this, there are centers which we call as associated centers. These centers are responsible for identification of objects, size, shape, calculations, memory regarding objects, naming objects, all those function. So while doing a higher function, that is we call mental status, there are a lot of things which are being there. Alertness, attention, cooperation, orientation in time, place and person, speech, memory for immediate, recent and remote events, calculation, right and left, orientation, finger agnosia, graphia, graphical recording, apraxia, construction and neglect, logics and abstraction, calculations, delusion, hallucination, moods, etc. These are all the things which ideally we should look for. But Normally we look for very few things like consciousness, behavior, intelligence we call as IQ, memory, emotion, orientation in time, place and person, regarding any hallucination or delusion, and speech. And also we ask him which is right-handed or left-handed. And in short, we call mini mental scale examination should be done. We'll be going through that. And sensory localization, discrimination regarding we call cortical sensations. So first always we look for what we call as level of consciousness. And this level of consciousness can be examined by two things, Glasgow Coma scale and other short methods, that is AVPU. And in that we have already discussed in detail in coma chapter. So they divide into 4 grades, some people divide into 5 grades. Grade 1 means individual who responds with recognition when their name is called and do not lapse into sleep when left undisturbed. This we call as person will be alert and he will be oriented. So that person we label as fully conscious. When person lapses into sleep, when undisturbed and is aroused only by pain or gentle tap, means we call external stimulus. And after that external stimulus, person is partly disoriented, and as soon as you leave that external stimulus, person goes back to sleep. That we'll call as drowsy. And when the person cannot respond to an external stimulus, but he responds to deep painful stimulus, and during that stimulus, person will withdraw the arms, he'll be able to localize the painful stimulus, and he will be disoriented. He will not be able to reply or answers. He may be able to respond partially when you obey some commands like open your eyes, show me your tongue. He may do that, and that state we call stupor. And when the person do not respond even to a deep painful stimulus, and during that deep painful stimulus person acquires either decorticate posture or decerebrate posture, we call that as coma. And in this stage, person is in a deep sleep, cannot be aroused by painful stimulus. He will either acquire a decorticate posture or a decerebrate posture. And both plantar will be extensor. Bilateral plantar will be extensor. Deep tendon reflex will be difficult to elicit. And there is one particular stage which is being described as grade 5, where person does not respond to a painful stimulus and person has got completely flaccid posture, or we call unresponsive, and that is called as a deep coma. By and large, these two are commonly considered as one single stage. And Glasgow Coma scale is grading depending upon the response to eye opening, verbal response, and to the motor response. We already discussed this in a coma chapter. So if a person has got spontaneous eye response, you give 4 score. When you give an external stimulus in the form of speech and he responds, means to the sound, 3, painful stimulus, 2, and there is no response, 1. As far as the verbal response is concerned, when you give an verbal response, means when you sound, if a person after response to the sound is fully oriented in time, place and person, score is given 5. If he is just confused, he is disoriented, 4 points. If he is just uttering inappropriate words, 3. The sounds are incompressible, 2. And there is no response, 1. When he obeys your command by oral response, 6 points. He moves to localize the pain on painful stimulus, 5 points. On deep painful stimulus, he withdraws and there is a flexor response, means we call as decorticate posture, 4 points. Flexion withdrawal from pain, and if there is a decorticate posture, 3 points. Decerebrate posture, 2 points. And if it is totally flaccid or almost we say non-responsive, then 1 point. So if the score is 15, it is normal. If it is more than 13 to 15, we usually use this particular terminology, means between 13 to 15, mild effect as far as Glasgow Coma Scale is concerned. If the score is between 9 to 12, moderate. And if person has got score between 3 to 8, we call severe disturbances in a Glasgow Coma Scale. So less than 9 is severe, between 9 and 12 moderate, and between 13 and 15 mild, and if it is 15 we consider that as normal. So eye response, verbal response and motor response. In ABPU again same, very similar. So if a person just becomes alert on an external stimulus, either by a sound, touch, light, vibration, any one of this, and then when he is fully alert and oriented, we call that as an alert, or we call conscious. If he responds to a verbal stimulus but is partially disoriented, then we label that as drowsy. He does not respond to an external stimulus in the form of a sound, light, touch, etc. But he responds only to painful stimulus, and he tries to identify the pain, tries to withdraw the pain, then we call that as a stupor. And during that painful stimulus, he might obey some of your oral commands, but he will not respond as far as other order is concerned, and he will not be able to answer any of your question. And on a deep painful stimulus, person is unresponsive, we usually label that as a coma. And these are the 4 important simple stage which you can identify, and that is in short called as ABPU. Same word, that is ACDU. These are the another way you can go for. Now you can see this particular child is little drowsy. She is also having little alteration in the mental status, and she is almost in a coma stage. So you will have to identify first whether the person is fully conscious or drowsy or stupor or in a coma stage. And only if the person is conscious, then only you can go for the second group of examination, that is we call cognitive function, which will include orientation, attention, memory, communication, calculation, construction, abstraction thinking, etc. We call cognitive function. So cognitive function will be only possible if the person is fully conscious. So we take it for granted the person is fully conscious. Now we go for the examination, what we call as attention. There are few words, usually when you are asking a question you can easily identify whether the person is attentive or not. There is something called as a selective attention. We know that whenever we are talking with someone, there is lot of sound in the surrounding, but we can have selective attention and we'll be able to listen the sound to whom we are talking, even in presence of lot of sounds. This is called selective attention. Then there is something called as a sustained attention. This is very classical when the person is in a school or person is listening to some person. That is called sustained attention. So sustained attention will include listening to a lecture, reading a book, looking at the movie, etc. Those are called sustained attention. Alternating attention is very frequently, you can see that one person is doing 2 or 3 works together. Like a mother is doing cooking simultaneously, teaching a child, and it is looking at some other function also, and while doing cooking also he is doing 2 things together. So that is called alternating attention. Then divided attention, similar thing, when the one person is concentrating on doing say some work on laptop or a mobile, etc., or while working on a laptop simultaneously he is listening on the mobile also. So that is called divided attention. These are all different type of attention. We are not much interested in that part. Now second function which we usually do is a memory function, and in that memory function we try to identify regarding recent memory, immediate memory, and past memory. So immediate recall, short term memory, long term memory, and depending upon this you will be asking few questions. Say as for example, in a short term memory you will be say short term memory, it is a capability to remember the current or day to day event. What was the eaten in a breakfast? Very simple question. When you came today, what you had in the early morning? That is short term memory. Immediate memory is recall the information after the interval of few seconds. Means you give some information and then ask him the question. That is immediate memory. And in a long term memory, like birthday, anniversary, mother name, father name, where you had gone for last movie, with whom you have gone, all those are called long term memory. So usually recent memory, immediate memory, and long term memory or past memory. Long term memory or past memory, these are the 3 things which are commonly being asked. Indirectly, this is also very easy to identify in orientation. This function you can do partially in orientation also. Say like time. When you are asking regarding a time, what is the time at present? So that is indirectly immediate memory. Regarding a place also, and then identifying a person. All these things gives you a orientation plus partly a memory also. So asking regarding a time, place and person gives you regarding the patient is oriented or not. So orientation in time, like what is the day, what is the month, what is the time at present, etc. Regarding a place, where you are, what is the name of the city, what is the state name, etc. And regarding a person, what's your name, how old are you, what is your birth date, what is your wife name, or what is your son name, what is your brother name, etc. So this is called as orientation in time, place and person. If any person who is fully alert and is oriented in time, place and person, we usually label them as fully conscious person with good orientation. So orientation in time, place and person is a must. That should be done. And that gives you a good idea regarding a cortical function. If any person who is disoriented or who is having an altered mental status, means is disoriented in time, place and person, is also disoriented between the episodes, he recovers in between, there is an episodic disorientation or there is a continuous disorientation. All this becomes very important, because disorientation will help you to identify altered mental status, and it will be also helping you to identify the stage of altered level of consciousness like drowsy, stupor or coma. Now if a person is fully conscious, now you can go for IQ. In an IQ, there are certain things which are very commonly being utilized, like calculation, abstraction, multiplication, plus minus, etc., according to his education. Then you can ask them to calculate certain figures or speak months backward or year backward forward, etc., and that will be what will be, you are doing a function we call as a concentration. So you can do one function is concentration. You can ask some question according to his education and try to find out what is his IQ. Now this will be very important in a person, because if the person IQ is deteriorating, that means he is having slowly what we call as person is deteriorating in a memory, and that will be very classical in a person who had a good IQ and now his IQ is becoming less. That is one of the thing which tells you regarding damage to the cortical function. Classical example is Wernicke's encephalopathy and Alzheimer's disease. In that, slowly the person starts getting alteration in IQ, deterioration in IQ. And if the child who is born with very diminished IQ, we usually label them as mentally retarded. So IQ will be very important, where you can do certain functions. Now there are specific function which you can do to identify one condition which is very, very important. That is, we call it the Gerstmann syndrome, where we do test for calculation, that is plus and minus, simple calculation. Then we always ask him to identify right and left. If the person has got disturbances in calculation, person is confused regarding identifying right hand, left hand, right index finger, left index finger, even person has got finger agnosia, person cannot identify finger properly, which finger it is, we call finger agnosia, and he cannot identify the graphical recording also, we call agraphia, means acalculia, right and left confusion. So person is disoriented as far as right and left. There is a finger agnosia, agraphia. This will be because of dominant parietal lobe damage, and that is given a name, Gerstmann syndrome. And dominant parietal lobe in a right-handed person will be left. So left parietal lobe damage in a right-handed person who has got acalculia, agraphia, finger agnosia, and right and left identification is confused. This will be labeled as Gerstmann syndrome. And if a person has got only hemi-neglect, means he is not able to identify only one side of the body, that is very classical in case of a non-dominant parietal lobe damage. Some person can have delusional thinking, means he will have disturbances as far as delusion and hallucinations. He can have mood disturbances. He cannot take a proper judgment. Abstract reasoning will be poor. Also, person will have disturbances in some of the cognitive function. This will be very, very important to identify the neurological stage. So neurocognitive testing, this will be done specially by psychiatric group of people. And very frequently to do that, we ask them to count forward and backward, count coins, give simple addition and subtraction. That will be a very, very simple test by which you can identify the cognitive function of cortex. Hallucination is patient will have a false feeling without an appropriate stimulus or a cause. That we call as a hallucination. Means there is no stimulus but person still says there is some object, there is some person, there is some light, there is some sound, and that we call as a hallucination. And delusion is false belief. That is, there is some stimulus but person misinterpret that stimulus, and that is called delusion. There is one more word, illusion, sorry, that is illusion. And delusion is person will have a false belief which are held despite against the preventing circumstances that I can fly. You are trying to poison me. These are called delusions. These are very commonly seen in psychiatric group. Illusion means you misinterpret the stimulus. Those are called illusions. I'll skip over this. There is there is one word called delirium and there is another word called as a dementia. Dementia means slowly deterioration of your IQ because of damage to the cortex. So confusion and disorientation are both in delirium and dementia. But in delirium, it is very frequently the person will have a acute confusional state and it is potentially reversible. And it will occur over a period of days and months. While dementia is a slow and insidious onset and it is slowly progressive, and dementia is usually not reversible. It is because of the gradual damage to cerebral cortex. And there is a classical example of dementia is Wernicke's encephalopathy. Good number of time in a Wernicke's encephalopathy, person can develop dementia. And one of the classical example will be Alzheimer's disease, where you get irreversible damage to cerebral cortex and it will lead to dementia. In short, now there is another function which is very commonly done as far as a higher function examination is concerned. We call cortical sensation. Normally person can identify the sensation, but localization, discrimination, 2-point discrimination regarding pain, touch, pressure, vibration, temperature sensation, etc. is selectively done only by cortex and particularly parietal lobe. This is called cortical sensation. Also, identifying the object by means of stereognosis, that is also the function of cerebral cortex. Identifying the shape of the objects, that is graphesthesia, that is also the function of cerebral cortex. And we have already mentioned acalculia, agraphia, finger agnosia, and right and left confusion will be classically seen in a Justman syndrome, where agraphia, finger agnosia will be a part of a cortical sensation. So we'll be going through how you examine. So when you ask the person to close the eye and touch one part of the body and you ask him whether he can identify, if he say yes, and then you ask him where, if he can identify means tactile localization is normal. And simultaneously if you touch on two opposite sides, say one stimulus is given on the right side, one stimulus is given on the left side simultaneously, and if a person is able to identify, we call discrimination, person is able to make out. And when you touch on the face only at two different points, then it is called 2-point discrimination. These are the tests which should be done. This is localization. Now here you can see there are 2 points. This is called 2-point discrimination. This is vibration sense. This is touch sense. Now you can see here, you are touching simultaneously on right side and left side. And if a person can identify both stimulus simultaneously, we call discrimination. This is touch sensation. This is temperature sensation. This is vibration sensation. This is pain sensation. We call localization, and this is called discrimination. 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 And discrimination you can do by touch sensation, pain sensation, temperature sensation, vibration, pressure, etc. And when you use 2-point very close by and on the same area, close area, we'll call that as a 2-point discrimination, which is very frequently done for pain, touch and temperature. You can see this is, you're touching on the right, you're touching on the left. This is we call as localization. Right side and left side, crude touch. Right and left, again touch sensation. Right and left, touch sensation. Pain, pain sensation. This is tactile localization. You are touching simultaneously on the two sides and person is supposed to identify those. We call discrimination. Here you can see simultaneously very close by on the one side only, and you are touching by two different points, and this is pain. So he is identifying two pain stimulus simultaneously. This is called 2-point discrimination. This is 2-point discrimination. This is touch and pain simultaneously. 2-point discrimination. 2-point discrimination. It is smallest distance will be in the tip of the finger. 2-point discrimination for pain. This is vibration sensation on right and left. This is stereognosis. You give a familiar object in the palm and ask him to identify with closed eye. He will be identifying by temperature, pressure, touch, etc. All those sensations are being utilized, and person is utilizing memory, and he identifies the object by touch, temperature, pressure. All those sensations are utilized, and then memory. So he identifies pen, he identifies coin, keychain, etc. We call stereognosis. If he doesn't identify, astereognosis. Coin, ball, keychain, key, etc. And when you write something on the palm, either the figure or ABCD, triangle, circle, rectangle, etc., that is called graphesthesia. And if a person can identify, we call his graphesthesia is normal. If he cannot identify, we usually call agraphesthesia, astereognosis. These are the words. So identifying of the object, stereognosis. If he cannot, astereognosis. And if he cannot identify the shape, what you have written, etc. in the palm, you'll call that as agraphesthesia. And then we go for what we call as a speech. This will be discussing in detail separately in a separate lecture. But while taking a history only, you can identify. You will have to identify very easily the type of aphasia and dysarthria. Very, very important. So in aphasia, again, Broca's aphasia, Wernicke's aphasia, motor aphasia, cortical aphasia, etc. Those are the different terms which are being utilized. So you will have to identify that in a speech disorder, whether person has got dysphasia or dysarthria. And a dysarthria can be because of disturbances in articulation, which can be because of cerebellar dysfunction, bulbar dysfunction, pseudobulbar palsy, or extrapyramidal symptoms. So dysarthria can be because of cerebellum, brainstem, pseudobulbar, bilateral pyramidal tract damage, or because of extrapyramidal. Or person has got disturbances in sound production, we call dysphonia, and this can be because of larynx, local pathophysiology. Local pathophysiology, that will be, say a simple example, a person has got little cough and cold, there will be disturbances in sound, or person has got one unilateral vocal cord palsy, recurrent laryngeal nerve palsy, that will also give rise to dysphonia. We will call that as hoarseness of voice. Classical example, Ortner syndrome in case of a big left atrial enlargement and left recurrent laryngeal nerve is paralyzed. So that will be there. And dysarthria will be because of cerebellum palsy, cerebellar disorders, the involvement of bulbar cranial nerves, particularly 9th, 10th, 12th cranial nerve, facial, all those which takes part in articulations. or you've got a bilateral pyramidal tract damage. And also, if there is a basal ganglia and extrapyramidal syndrome, that will increase the motor tone and that will produce monotonous speech, and that we call as a dysarthria. While if there is a damage to cerebral cortex, we come across Wernicke's aphasia, conductive aphasia, Broca's aphasia, etc. So that we'll be discussing separately in a chapter on a speech disorder. So dysphasia, which can be Broca's, Wernicke's, global or conductive, we'll be discussing separately. So mental status examination can be also done by mini status examination. And in mini mental scale examination, there are few things which are being noted: orientation, registration, attention and calculation, recall, language and copying. Then depending upon the score, you put them. So there is something called as a mini mental score examination. So that is very frequently a shortcut. So in orientation, these are the questions. In registration, in attention, what are the questions you ask for, what you ask the person, recall, language, etc. These are all that things. And in that the maximum score is 30. So depending upon what score you get, accordingly. If score is more than 24, we call that as a normal. And if score is less than 24, it goes in favor of dementia. So these are the things. In cognitive function, you go for orientation, registration, attention, calculation, registration, recall and language. This is called ORARL. And again in that, place and time. In orientation, registration, name 3 objects, attention and calculation, serial word back forward and backward, registration, recall previously named 3 objects, and then you try to ask him name 2 objects, draw the pentagon, etc. And then accordingly you give the score. And this is called as a mini mental score. So between 24 to 30, no cognitive impairment. Between 18 to 23, mild cognitive impairment. 0 to 17, severe cognitive impairment. This is mini mental score. And depending upon that score, you put them into different groups. I'm not going into detail. This is roughly what we examine in a higher function in nervous system examination. Mainly, again, to make it very short. First, level of consciousness. Second, if person is fully conscious, then only you will be able to examine the other part of it, that is memory, IQ, orientation in time, place and person, cortical sensation. These are the things, almost it is done in every patient. And then further we go for graphical calculations, right and left identification, finger agnosia, etc. to identify Justman syndrome. In short, I've tried to cover up as much as possible in higher function examination. In an unconscious patient, you cannot examine any one of all those things, because person, if he is unconscious, he will not be able to cooperate while examining memory, orientation. That is not possible. So first is level of consciousness is a must. I feel this will be very helpful to you in your everyday practice, as well as very frequently in your oral exam. Whenever some case is given to you, very frequently will be asked in your oral as well as in your theory. It can be asked, and also it will be very useful in your everyday practice. Go through again, it will be very useful. If you like this particular lecture, please don't forget to press button like. You can subscribe, you can give your suggestions so I can improve and if you feel that it is helpful to your friends also, you can share with your friends. Whatever way I can explain you, I've tried to cover up that. See you in next lecture. Thank you all for taking out time. I know that your time is very valuable and I appreciate that you have spent some of the time with me. See you in next lecture.